Good morning, students. So we have started chapter chemical reactions and we have discussed about the definition of chemical reaction and some of the terms related to chemical reaction. And we have discussed some metabolic reactions and certain conditions we have discussed that favors a chemical change. So after that let's see that what we have discussed. I'm giving you a rough idea like chemical reactions with their characteristics we have studied. Let's see that what happens in a chemical reaction. Chemical reactions generally it is a process in which new substances with new properties are formed. These we have studied. Now we have seen that only rearrangement of atoms takes place in chemical reaction, right? We have seen that law of conservation of mass holds good in a chemical reaction as the atoms only rearranged. Then we have studied about reactants and products. So the substance which take part in a chemical reaction, we name them reactants, and the new substance that is being formed in a reaction which we write in the right hand side, we call them products. So these are the few things which we have studied in the previous class. Today we are going to discuss the next topic, that is characteristics of chemical reaction. So see in your book there are few characteristics of chemical reactions which we are going to discuss now. So let's see the characteristics of chemical reaction. So in a chemical reaction the substance known as reactants are converted into new substance called products. The conversion of reactants into product in a chemical reaction is often accompanied by some features which can be observed easily. See your book. The easily observable features which take part as a result of chemical reaction are known as characteristics of a chemical reaction. So the important characteristics, the main 5 characteristics that is given in your book of chemical reaction are: first, evolution of a gas, then formation of a precipitate, change in color, then change in temperature. In your book, energy change is same as change in temperature. And the last one is change in state. So one by one we are going to discuss about the characteristics of chemical reaction. So we will begin with evolution of gas. So let's see chemical reaction and its characteristics. See the figure. A chemical reaction is a phenomena of formation of new substances. So rearrangement of atoms of the reactants gives rise to the formation of new substances. Heating sodium acetate and sodium hydroxide give methane gas. So CH3COONA, that is sodium acetate, plus sodium hydroxide, that is NaOH, it gives rise to methane gas, that is CH3, and sodium carbonate, that is Na2CO3. So in this reaction you can see that gas is released. So this is the example of evolution of gas. So some chemical reaction takes place with the evolution of gas. So this is the first characteristics. As you can see, one example I'm going to give you in evolution of gas, that is when sodium reacts with water, that is Na plus H2O, it gives sodium hydroxide, that is NaOH, and hydrogen gas is released. So this chemical reaction takes place with the evolution of gas. So this is one characteristics of chemical reaction. In your book, one example is given, that is zinc reacts with sulfuric acid to give zinc sulfate with hydrogen gas. So that is also one of the example of evolution of gas. Now what is the meaning of effervescence? Effervescence means rapid evolution of gas, means evolution of gas occurs rapidly. So in any chemical reaction rapid evolution of gas occurs, then that is we call effervescence. The next example is there in your book, that sodium carbonate reacts with hydrochloric acid, it gives sodium chloride, that is salt, plus water, that is H2O, plus carbon dioxide gas. So remember, every time when carbonates, like sodium carbonate is there, so when carbonates reacts with acid, it gives salt plus water plus carbon dioxide gas. Please remember that thing. So it will be easy to learn. Carbonate plus acid gives out salt plus water plus carbon dioxide gas. So that is also one of the example of evolution of gas. Now let's move to the another characteristics, that is change of color. So certain reaction occurs with color change. So some reactions which occur when color change. Suppose if you are mixing something in a particular solution, the color changes. So that is one of the example of color change. So color change due to the formation of new products, right? When some iron fillings, see one example is here, it is given that when some iron fillings are placed in a blue colored solution of copper sulfate, a green colored solution of ferrous sulfate is formed along with copper. So CuSO4 plus Fe gives out copper, that is Cu, plus FeSO4. So here in this particular reaction, color changes from blue to green. So this is one of the characteristics of chemical reaction. In your book, two examples are given, that is red lead oxide. If you heat lead oxide, which is red in color, if you heat it, oxygen gas released and lead monoxide formed, which is yellow color. One more example is given, that is when potassium iodide, if you add chlorine water to potassium iodide solution, you will get iodine, which is of purple color. So from colorless to color appear. So that is also one of the example of change of color. Now the third characteristics is formation of precipitates. Okay, I forgot to mention that in first characteristics, that is evolution of gas, where the evolution of gas occurs if you put an upside arrow, that means see here just beside H2 one upside arrow is there. That means what? Gas evolves. Okay, so if in the product side only will give, because the new substance is formed, we write in the right hand side. So in the right hand side only, whatever gas released, we will put one upside arrow mark, or you can write under bracket G to show that the gas evolves in this particular reaction. Now let's move to formation of precipitates. So one example is given here, like when a few drops of ammonium hydroxide are added to an aqueous solution of ferric chloride, a brown colored precipitate is formed. In your book also example is given, ferric chloride, that is FeCl3, it reacts with NH4OH, that is ammonium hydroxide. It gives FeOH whole thrice plus NH4Cl. Okay, so here a brown color precipitate is formed, which you can see here in the test tube. So from nothing to a brown precipitate formed. So here precipitate is formed, insoluble particle is formed in the bottom of the test tube. So that is precipitate, and you can put one downward arrow to show that precipitate is formed. So remember, upside arrow means evolution of gas and downside arrow means formation of precipitate. Now let's see the other characteristic, that is change of state. Okay. So you can see that some reactions occurs, the physical state of product is different from that of the reactants. Like in this case, electrolysis of water, I am showing you 2H2O. It is in liquid form. It converted, if you pass electricity to water, it forms H2 plus O2, which is in gaseous form. So from liquid to gaseous form occurs. That means the change of state occurs. One more example is there in your book, that is, see, the just opposite to this, 2H2 plus O2. If you give it electric spark at room temperature, what happened? H2O in liquid form formed. So there also, from gaseous to liquid, so the change of state occurs. So that is the example of change of state. Now the last characteristics, that is energy change. Energy change means what? Energy, either in the form of heat, light, electricity, sound, etc., is either being absorbed or evolved. So when energy, that is, suppose we're talking about heat, if heat is released, that means that example is an example of exothermic reaction, right? When the reaction when heat is released, it is an example of exothermic, and when the heat is absorbed, it is an example of endothermic. So see, release of heat. So reactions which involve release of heat are called exothermic reactions. Suppose I'm giving you an example, like when water is added to quicklime, water becomes hot and produces calcium hydroxide. Okay, and what is the common name of calcium hydroxide? Slaked lime. You should remember this one. The question may come in your exam. So CaO plus H2O, it gives CaOH whole twice, that is calcium hydroxide, and in this reaction heat is released. So this is the example of exothermic reaction. The another example you can see here, absorption of heat. Reaction which involve absorption of heat are called endothermic reaction. Okay, so one example is given for exothermic. You can see in your for endothermic, you can see in your book, like when limestone, that is CaCO3, calcium carbonate, when you supply heat to limestone, what happen? Calcium oxide along with carbon dioxide gas released. So that example is an example of endothermic reaction because heat is absorbed in that particular reaction. So this is all about the characteristics. This is all about the characteristics of chemical reaction. In the next class, we will discuss about the classification of chemical reaction. Till then, please study and stay safe in your home. Thank you.